after he names and ordains the 12, whom he called apostles, in Mark it says that they went to a house, there were a bunch of people there, and specifically his friends heard of it, and they went to lay hold on him because they said he's beside himself. And then it goes into, in Mark, that he was accused of healing by the power of Beelzebub, the prince of devils. In Matthew, he is accused of healing by Beelzebub, and that is a little bit later, chapter 12. However, before both of these events, the story in Luke, right after he ordains the 12, continues immediately with him giving another sermon at that very mountain. So this would be before he goes to any house, before anyone comes there and accuses him of healing by the power of Beelzebub, because it says that was after he went to that house in Mark. So the very next event to record is what happens next in Luke, which is the Sermon on the Plain. And that is only in Luke. It's similar to the Sermon on the Mount, but a lot shorter. Now, Luke 6:17, and he came down with them and stood in the plain, and the company of his disciples and a great multitude of people out of all. I think I already mentioned these places. Yeah. Out of all Judea. A great multitude of people. Okay, so I'm going to end at a great multitude of people, which came near to him. Which. I think I was going to go up to the word which and just end at came to hear him. And the company. Okay, so, and he came down with them and stood in the plain, and the company of his disciples, and a great multitude of people. All of that is still to be used. Now, the next word, out of all Judea and Jerusalem, and from the seacoast Tyre and Sidon, that I've already used. But the next words, the end of the verse 17, which came to hear him and to be healed of their diseases, all of that I haven't used yet. Company of his disciples, great multitude of people. And then just go right into which came to hear him and to be healed of their diseases, and they that were vexed with unclean spirits, and they were healed, and a whole multitude sought to touch him, for there went virtue out of him and healed them all. So, how to combine the introduction to the Sermon on the Mount with the Sermon on the Plain, in spite of those objections I had before, where Jesus saw the multitude and went up for the Sermon on the Mount, versus in Luke, where he was already up the mountain, and then he came down to heal them, and then spoke in the plain. I know I said that in Gary Crossland's work, the Merged Gospels, there's no guarantee that the location he was at, that is called Eremos Heights, is actually the location of the Sermon on the Mount and the Sermon on the Plain. But if I'm right, if what I received, if what was revealed to me is right, that they are the same, then that could be the place. It would make sense. There was a mountain, and as part of the mountain, a great plain. So if that's true, and again, there's a few ifs in here, but I think I know how to combine them if that's the case. Luke says this, starting in verse 12, and it came to pass in those days that he went up into a mountain to pray, and continued all night in prayer to God. Matthew has, and seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain. I think that saying he went up into a mountain should only be used the first time it's spoken in Luke. The night before, he goes up into a mountain to pray. I can combine whatever words are similar between the two to say, yes, he was already up the mountain. Then he prayed all night, he ordained the 12 apostles, and then, seeing the multitude, from there, he came down. Luke 6:17. I'll put from Matthew, and seeing the multitudes, or possibly from later in 17, a great multitude of people, he came down and stood in the plain. That's when I'll mention who are there, the company of his disciples, which came to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. And they that were vexed with unclean spirits, and they were healed. So there was another situation, I believe it was the feeding of the 5,000. He heals people and then goes up the mountain. Because if people are dying or are sick, it would make sense that they would first be healed and then given a lesson in life and how to behave from now on. So it makes perfect sense that he would do all this healing as mentioned in Luke, cast the spirits out of people, and then preach, especially if it's this long preaching, which could go on for, all of this, I'm not exactly sure how long it would take. To just have them sit there when they're sick and dying, say, listen to me first, I'm going to give you a lesson, and then I'll miraculously heal you, even though I could have done it the whole time. I don't think so. It does make sense that the passage from Luke should come first, that they were healed. Then he went up. But he was already up earlier, so I think this second part, he's going to have come down to heal them, then go back up a ways to be above them, so that when he preaches, his voice travels more. That makes perfect sense too. It's logical. So I'm going to have he went up, but not into a mountain, because that brings into confusion. Is it a different mountain? Is it a different time? I'm going to say the mountain. That way it's the same place. And I think I know how to do that too. I'm going to say seeing the multitudes. I already said I was probably going to change that to seeing a great multitude of people. He sees the multitude that's there, or you could say from Luke, a great multitude that's there. He goes down and heals them all. Then when they're all healed, because it does say that in Luke, and they were healed, Luke 6:18, that's when the urgent needs have been addressed, and now he can go into the lesson. He's going to go back up a ways. I'll say from Matthew, he went up the mountain. I'll probably combine into. So then after he heals them, he went up the mountain. The from Matthew as well. It may not be the prettiest, but I think it's the best. So Luke, I already have, and it came to pass in those days that he went up into a mountain to pray. And I already have Mark as well. Look at that. That's when he named the 12, that's right. Okay, well, I'm just going to have to combine. I'm going to leave when he was in a certain city, just before the healing of the leper in Luke. I only combined that with the Sermon on the Mount because I believed that must have happened there. And I'll just have here he went up into a mountain. Seeing the multitudes. I'm not going to use he went up, but I will use into a, because I'm also going to save mountain. I'm going to say he went up the mountain. And seeing the multitudes. I'm going to use multitudes and seeing a great multitude. So, and seeing, I'll save that as well. He went up when he was sick. So I think that's it. Just into a is going to be combined with Matthew. Now that he's done naming them, that he's done praying at Luke, and he came down with them and stood in the plain. But I'm first going to have and seeing the multitudes. Matthew and seeing. But also from Matthew. I'm going to save the, I'll use multitudes. But from Luke, a great multitude of people. Later, I have to put, he stood in the plain, and the company of his disciples. You know what? Maybe I should put the entire mention of this list of people first. That's who he's seeing. Then that he came down and healed them all. Yeah, I think I should. And seeing a great multitude of people which came to hear him, and the company of his disciples. No, because Luke has the company of his disciples and a great multitude of people which came to hear him and be healed. So, disciples and a multitude are the people. And the reasons are to hear him and then to be healed. So if I'm going to mention that he sees, I have to put the fact that they're all diseased and vexed of spirits. I'd have to rearrange. Well, it'd be a rearranging anyway because I'm adding Matthew. Yeah, I think it's okay. And seeing a great multitude of people and the company of his disciples, which came to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. That could work. And they that were vexed with unclean spirits, he came down with them and stood in the plain, and they were healed. Yeah. I'd be rearranging the verses in Luke, but because I have to add from Matthew, seeing the multitude, I think it'd be okay. Or maybe if I don't mix it up, I could leave the company of his disciples first, and you just have to get from the context that these are not the apostles. They're all the other disciples that he did not name and ordain. So I could put, and seeing the company of his disciples and a great multitude of people which came to hear him. And seeing the company of his disciples. No, because I need to draw attention away from the 12 he just named. So I should put the people first, the multitude of people, and also the disciples who are not the ordained 12. Yeah, so I'm going to put great multitude of people, that entire phrase, first. And seeing a great multitude of people and the company of his disciples, which came to hear him and to be healed of their diseases, and they that were vexed. So I'm just going to have to move. He came down with them and stood in the plain, just after the mention of who these people are, and before, and they were healed. So now it would read, and it can read this way. I'm not sure if it'll stay this way. Now I know it's a reordering of verse 17. You know, I don't feel comfortable reorganizing these verses in Luke, just so that it sounds better. In Luke it has the list of his apostles, and then it goes right into, and he came down with them and stood in the plain, and the company of his disciples, and a great multitude of people out of all Judea, all these places, which came to hear him to be healed of their diseases. They were vexed, they were healed. So if it's strange already in Luke, I'll just keep it strange. So, and seeing the company of his disciples, and a great multitude of people, and a great multitude of people, which came to hear him, and to be healed of their diseases, and they that were vexed, with unclean spirits, and they were healed. Okay, so I do have he came down with them later. Seeing a great company of his disciples. I do have to put seeing. Yeah, if I'm going to add seeing from Matthew here at all, it would only make sense that he has to see these people before he comes down. So if I say it as it is from Luke, he came down to these great company of people, it wouldn't make sense to say now he saw them, because that would be the reason why he came down. And if I have to add from Matthew in here that he saw these people and then reacted to it, that's just how it has to go. I have to have seeing as the cause, going down as the effect. So multitudes is in Matthew. So I could say a great multitude of people or great multitudes. And a great multitude or and great multitudes of people. You know, it's naming a bunch of places. Judea, Jerusalem, Tyre and Sidon. So I'm going to put multitudes from Matthew. And then because of that, I will say the multitude without the S is both. And then I'll add the S from only Matthew. But because of that, I have to take out the A. And I hope people don't accuse me of blasphemy. It's just better syntax. Great multitudes. I can't say a great multitudes. You don't say a plural. And seeing the company of his disciples and great multitudes of people, and to hear him to be healed of their diseases, they were vexed on the spirits. He came down with them and stood in the plain, and they were healed. You know what? I'm thinking of going right back all the way to the original of Luke. Start with, and he came down with them and stood in the plain. Then put, and seeing the company of his disciples and great multitudes of people. Yeah. If it can work originally, it should. And he came down with them and stood in the plain. Now I'll add seeing from Matthew, and seeing the company of his disciples, not the apostles. You're just going to have to infer. It's a different group. And great multitudes. I did cut out the A because I'm using multitudes from Matthew, plural, so the A wouldn't work. Of people which came to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. It's all the same from Luke. And they that were vexed with unclean spirits, and they were healed. And the whole multitude sought to touch him. They ran out virtue of him, and healed them all.